Next up was a colonoscopy. They took that, but it was normal. There was nothing wrong with the colon. There was no growths, nothing like that, which is a good thing. The bouts of pancreatitis ended up going from 2006 to 2008, and in 2008 was when I was finally diagnosed with chronic pancreatitis. The doctor down in Milwaukee said that even though most chronic pancreatitis cases have calcium buildups on their pancreas, he was fairly sure I still had it, just it wasn't showing up because the changes were happening on a small cellular level. They were happening at a micro level, not a macro level. July 2008. Not a good time. They had referred me to the Mayo Clinic in Minneapolis, or Rochester, I'm sorry, Rochester, Minnesota. They had sent me over there and said, if anyone can help you, it's them. I met a doctor. His name was Dr. Chari. And basically, after looking at all of my tests and all of my medical records, he said this is going to turn into pancreatic cancer, and then we'll do something about it. Now, I don't know if you've heard of cases of pancreatic cancer, but they don't last long. You have about 3 months from onset of symptoms to death. And at that point, he had signed my death certificate as far as I was concerned. I asked him why he couldn't do anything before it turned into pancreatic cancer, and he said there wasn't anything to be done. So I quickly came to terms with my mortality, and I was 21 at that point. And I remember coming back from Minneapolis, and my fiance and I had a wedding to go to. And I remember just losing my mind, and I drank and drank. Didn't black out, but got fairly intoxicated. I just couldn't handle it at that point, and I just didn't want to feel it anymore. So, we didn't give up. He kept looking, and sometimes my mom would look, and she found a chronic pancreatitis group on Yahoo. So she joined that, and these people were saying, go check out a Dr. Sutherland in Minneapolis. And they said that he removes the pancreas, that he goes in, he takes out the pancreas, and what he does then is separates the islets, which make your insulin, from the rest of the pancreas, because the digestive cells are actually the dangerous ones in cases of chronic pancreatitis. And he puts those islets in your own liver. So they're your own cells, but then they continue making insulin in your liver. They just kind of get moved around. So we emailed them. They got me in within 2 months to see the doctor, and I came with the Rubbermaid containers that are about, I don't know, like yay high, yay wide, and they were full of binders of medical history notes. So the Dr. Sutherland looked over this, and he was in his 70s at the time, actually, and he said, you're a candidate for this surgery. He said, don't, because they wanted to do a biopsy over in Mayo Clinic, I don't know, to take a look at things. He said, don't do that, because what you're doing is then removing potential islet cells that could be transplanted. We ended up, you want to be in camera? Come here. Come here. Come see the camera. Yes. This is my baby girl, Tomoko. Yes. Can you say hi? Can you say hi? Does he want to go down? Yeah. Figured she'd... Thanks for the tail hit. Figured she'd stop in and say hi. Hey, maybe I'll get more views because there's a cat in it. Robert X was saying something about that in the comment section. I found that to be really hilarious. 2 months after our consultation, I went in for the surgery. They took out the pancreas, they transplanted my islet cells to my liver. Unfortunately, because the pancreas tail lies right over your spleen, they typically can't do that surgery without interrupting the spleen. So they have to end up taking the spleen out. And that means I'm now immunocompressed. No. That means I am now immunocompromised. I have to be really careful around bacterial infections because I have absolutely no defense if anything is bacterial. Basically, people have to let me know if they are ill, and I try to avoid it as much as possible, being around anybody. I was still having pain when I went to the bathroom. 6 months later, 4 months later, they got me in for more imaging. He did say that the colon had looked a little large when he did the pancreas surgery, but sometimes, because you'll typically see that, it's called megacolon. You'll typically see that with cases of chronic pancreatitis, and it's exacerbated because you're given opiates for pain for the chronic pancreatitis, and those slow your colon down and can actually make megacolon worse. So they ended up in April 2009 removing 87% of my colon. He actually sent, because I wanted a picture. I know it's really, really bizarre, but wanted a picture, and he sent it to us. It was 40 pounds that was removed. The colon was about this big. It was supposed to be about that big. It was about this big around, and it was longer. So yeah, they took that out. The next year, unfortunately, I was still having problems with eating. It seemed like the food would sit in my stomach for a really long time. So they did a test where you eat radioactive eggs, which is pretty cool. But then they take images consecutively. That one is another 4-hour one. That one did last 4 hours this time. Seemed to be okay, but they found that it was taking over 10 hours for my stomach to empty, which is not normal. It's supposed to take 2. So, in Minneapolis, back in Minneapolis again, they removed the lower part of my stomach, and they had also noticed that material from the small intestine was backing up into the stomach. And so what they did was they rerouted the whole small intestine. So the small intestine went from the bottom of the stomach. They moved that opening up to the liver so that bile could directly drain from the liver right into the small intestine. It wouldn't go through the stomach. And then the stomach reattached farther down in the small intestine. And that was called an antrectomy with a Roux-en-Y gastrojejunostomy. Pretty long ass name. They found later that year that I had a bleeding ulcer in my stomach because I was having cramping while eating, or pain rather, while eating. Basically, it was right on the incision line of where they removed the lower third of the stomach, and that is called an anastomotic ulcer, which means it's not an ulcer that people, 80% of the time when people get an ulcer, it's caused by a bacteria called H. pylori. This was not. This was just because there was a scar there, it made it weaker, and it basically grew right where the scar was.